Bethesda, we gotta talk, okay? I bought a PlayStation VR for Skyrim VR, and I am not disappointed. I have told all my friends since the day I bought that game that to me, Skyrim VR is a VR seller. That is the only game I maintain you would need to enjoy VR. It looks great, it plays great, it controls great. So when my wife bought me this today, Doom VFR, and I was like, sweet, yet another Bethesda product that I could sink my teeth into, another world that I am absolutely fascinated by, and by the way, it's going to have that amazing gunplay, right? Wrong. And that is why I'm so frustrated. I set everything up to do a really good Let's Play with you guys, and it became painfully aware. I became painfully aware within seconds that this game does not control remotely close like Skyrim VR. If it had, this would be a very different review. But no, we're going to talk about how cool this game could have been. And we're going to talk about how the PlayStation VR aim controller, the PlayStation Move controller, and even the old trusty DualShock 4. Three separate control mechanisms all control Doom VFR differently, all control Doom VFR like garbage. And it is so frustrating to me. I don't understand. Bethesda, please, all you have to do is take the Skyrim control scheme and dump it on top of Doom VR, and I will be ecstatic, as will everyone else. But no. So let me get off that subject for a second and tell you about everything that this game does right. And that is pretty much everything. It's a fresh story on an existing planet, obviously, takes place at Mars at the UAC compound. You play as a guy who gets destroyed, a scientist. Within the first 5 seconds, your whole body gets gored. As a matter of fact, the opening cinematic is you reassembling your body under this kind of robotic AI. And that's the bounds that kind of explain how you can teleport and why when you have, if you were using the Move controller, your hands look like they're floating and you have no arms because you don't have any arms, because you're just this robot now and you have like these floating hand modules in front of you that your brain can kind of control to use for your weapons. And that's a really cool idea. What it does is it allows you to hold the gun way out in front of you, for example, and not see your arm and not understand why it's not there. Or why when you teleport through an enemy, first of all, why you even teleport, but as you teleport through them and it explode and how the screen kind of bathes in blood for a second, it kind of explains how you're like blowing through an enemy, and it works. The graphics are intense. It looks exactly like the UAC. You actually walk into Dr. Samuel Hayden's office much, I believe, sooner than you do when you're walking through with the Doomslayer. Everything is still pretty much intact at this point. It looks like the demonic invasion has only just begun. Um, and walking down the corridors and seeing the blood drip from the ceiling and seeing the way all the textures and everything are there in 3D, all the sparks, all the futuristic tech, it looks really, really good. Bethesda did an amazing job of capturing a great environment and a great sandbox for you to play in. Now, it is, at least it appears to me, I haven't really gotten too far into it. It does appear to be on the shorter side. Everything is much less dense than the Doom computer game, and or the console, whatever game, I guess. I guess that's okay. You only get one upgrade instead of three. Your skills are very, very limited. You're pretty much going to just be throwing a shit ton of grenades and shooting a bunch of enemies and teleporting. You're not going to have tons of weapon mods like you did in the first game. There are some collectibles, but they're pretty easily found. It's really more about putting that Doom experience with a nice wrap around it. The soundtrack exactly ripped right out of the other Doom game. just that really heavy electric, metally guitar sound, really hard bass lines, really intense during the fights. As the enemies approach you and you're shooting them and you teleporting them, they explode and the music ramps up. And then when everybody dies, it's just silent again, and you just hear your footsteps as you kind of walk through the corridor, and the ambiance of other demons like trying to figure out how to get to you. It works really well. However, all that said, the controls are really bad. There are three different control types. The one that is actually playable is with the regular DualShock 4 controller. And that plays exactly as every other shooter with one exception. Your gun and your grenade are mounted almost like to your head. So everywhere you look, that is your crosshair, okay? So if you want to turn and look at an enemy and shoot, you have to like look them right at the enemy, and then you hold down the right trigger and you'll shoot directly at what you're looking at. This is weird because, one, it feels like you're not a person. It feels like you're flying around in some sort of weird ship or like you're doing dive bomb runs. But more importantly, VR is very immersive because in VR, the space exists even when you're not looking at it. That's why in Skyrim, it's so cool. When you walk by a bush, you can pick up the bush. You can harvest like berries off a bush with the right move controller while you're looking out over to the left. And what ends up happening is you really start to paint in your head a 3D space. I know, for example, that my dog is sitting over here behind me to my right. I don't need to turn around and look at her to see her to know that she is laying there. And when VR is done well, you are in that environment and you can freely move your hands as you would in reality in the VR space. When you take away that space by forcing me to look at what I'm shooting at, you eliminate the entire point of VR. The fun point of VR is standing behind a pole like this and like leaning out and shooting and coming back. The fun of VR is not looking everything you want to do, literally straight into their eye sockets and shooting them. When you want a headshot, you have to look right at the guy's head. How cool is it to be shooting at an enemy and then glance over to your right in another corridor to see if you're about to be flanked, or to see if there's an opportunity where you could throw a quick grenade and continue your firing in a different direction. That's where the DualShock 4 controller method falls apart. And unfortunately, it's the only one that gives you true control of your character, 360-degree motion, using both analog sticks to perfection. I should give that one caveat because with the PlayStation VR controller, that works as well, because you notice you have two thumbsticks. You have one on the end here, and you have one here. And you think, oh, okay, that's great. Well, let me do a little thing here to show you why that falls apart. Because now you do get control. Let's say you are playing, right? Here's your controller and you're shooting. I'm shooting. I can look over here. So that part of it works. The problem is the PlayStation camera doesn't always sync this up well. And what happens is the controller starts bouncing all over the place and it makes you dizzy. Because while you think in your visual head the 3D model of the gun is right in front of you, where it should be shooting, sometimes it gets confused and it'll suddenly go up here, it'll start to jitter. You guys have seen this kind of stuff before in VR. This is not something new to Doom. But the problem is the tracking is really, really bad. And more, even worse than that, because of the way having to hold the controller with two hands, having to have your thumb here and your thumb here, right? You are almost kind of always in the shoulder position, which is fine for a one-handed weapon. Or it's fine if you only have you're only holding one weapon at a time, right? But in Doom, your left hand is always reserved as the grenade. So everywhere you walk around, this is how the game is going to represent you in the 3D space, even though you're playing like this. And it is disorienting to look over and see a floating hand. I guess you could just assume that it's not your hand. The problem, though, is that a lot of times when you press the button, which is on the front here, to throw the grenade, your character will kind of like throw it much farther than where you wanted it to be, because depending on how you're holding the gun, the hand will constantly do this with you. And it makes your grenade throws bad. And I know it sounds like I'm being petty when I tell you this, but it was extremely disorienting. I think back to like Farpoint, which I thought really did set a very high standard when it came to single weapon combat. And I feel like in Doom, if you could just get rid of that grenade altogether, maybe the game would then understand and start to more interpolate where your gun is instead of trying to force your HUD to always show you this. And I feel like that's where that mechanic falls apart. Yes, you can free aim. Yes, you can look in different directions. Yes, you can really enjoy the 3D space. But when the tracking is so bad and it's constantly missing where you're at, whether you stand up, whether you sit down, as you look around, it does get jarring and it breaks the experience. And the problem with breaking the experience is why even play VR if there's no experience you can take part of? Now, the last control method is the good old handy dandy PlayStation Move controllers. Now, the Move controllers, I think, are wonderful devices. They fit really well in your hand. Really well in your hand. It's very easy to have your gun twist your hand freely. It's very easy to have your grenade hand here, which is dumb, but at least you can, in your head, you can feel that you have a separate hand here, as opposed to just this floating hand, like I said earlier. What I really liked about this control scheme was that when you're taking the gun and you turn it sideways, let's say for the pistol, which has infinite ammo, and you start shooting the pistol, you see each individual bullet case fly up in the air and they fall on the ground, cling, 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 and they roll away. Now they do eventually phase out. I think there's like 50 or so before they start to vanish. But it's very immersive when you're shooting at an enemy and you're seeing clips of bullets fly past you. Why did I notice this? Not in the other two control schemes, because when I was shooting, the gun actually was at a range where I felt like it should be, as opposed to the PlayStation VR aim controller, where the gun was bouncing all over the place, as opposed to the DualShock 4 controller, where my guns were mounted up here on my head and the casings were flying up over my head. I would have never even seen them. So that part was cool. The problem with this control scheme is that there is no incremental turn left or right. So you have, like on Skyrim, you press either the two face buttons here, X or O, and you rotate in 15-degree increments, which is awesome for circle strafing. You hold down one button to walk, and you start tapping the other button, and you can slowly circle strafe around an enemy. Perfect when you're casting fire on them, perfect when you're doing a dragon shout, whatever. This should work perfectly and align perfectly to Doom VFR, but it does not. And the reason it does not is because there is no incremental turn button. You have one button that will rotate your character 180 degrees behind you, which is, number one, extremely just jarring. It's like, whoa, wait, why did I do that? But number two, if you're walking down a hallway straight and you want to turn to the left, there's no easy way to do that physically. Then instead of me sitting there with my headset on, playing this way, okay, now I want to turn to the left, I have to do this. Now I'm playing this way. Well, that's fine as long as the action is now going this way. But you guys know as well as I do, eventually I'm going to have to make another left turn. Now my back is to the camera. Now I'm going to have to, now I'm cognizant that the VR headset controller is wrapping around my ankle or touching my ankle. This is weird now. And I have to do a quick 180 turn, turn around, and then turn back around to realign myself so I'm kind of square with my TV. Now, there's no rule that I have to be facing my TV at all times playing VR, but let's face it, VR works best when the camera and with all the major sensors from the VR headset are facing mostly in line with the camera. There are sensors on the side and the back for this exact purpose, but the tracking is just not as good without you looking dead center. That's why a lot of times I sit down. That's why when I have people come over to try VR, I recommend them to sit down so you don't get lost in that spatial awareness, so you don't fall out the window, and more importantly, so that the camera and the experience is the best because this is the way it was designed to be played. Unfortunately, because of that lack of that 15-degree or 20-degree movement with these controllers, you are really forced to do this, like I said, this song and dance, where you have to position yourself backwards from the TV, then rotate 180, then rotate back around to realign yourself. And you end up spending more time figuring out how to position yourself so that you can walk forward and look back in a normal direction than you are enjoying the experience, which does what? The common theme here. It takes you out of the experience and it makes the VR experience less enjoyable to play, and therefore it makes it not as fun. So, final verdict on Doom VFR. Beautiful game, beautiful score. The controls are abysmal. And unfortunately, because the controls are so bad, it's very hard to recommend until they are patched, and hopefully they are. Maybe they never will be. It's very hard to recommend this to anybody because you're going to be struggling with the controls so much, you're going to lose sight of everything else that's happening in the game, and you're just not going to have fun with it. And I think that's the problem. I think if they had the control scheme locked down, this game would be on par with Skyrim, where it's a cool world that you can check out, a fun experience where you can really get in there, teleport into enemies, be a badass, be the Doom Slayer, although you're not really the Doom Slayer, you're some random Dr. Abraham guy. But you get my point. You can really role play and enjoy that experience. Instead, you're constantly going to be fighting with the controls, whatever they are, trying to figure out how do I make my character do what I want so it doesn't look stupid? Or how do I make my character do something so that it feels natural? And unfortunately, in the state of the game right now, there is no such way to do it. So I would say stay very far away from Doom VFR on PlayStation 4 until Bethesda can figure out how to make the controls better. It doesn't seem like it's happening anytime soon. So this right now is a pass. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Get out there, play some VR, particularly Skyrim. And thank you guys so much for watching. I'll probably be doing some more VR videos soon. I still have quite a laundry list of VR titles behind me, but when this one came through the mail today, I was so excited. I stopped everything and just dived right in. And I'm kind of sad that I did because that's probably the last time I play it until I can hear about any kind of patching coming out for the controls. So that's all I have. Thank you guys so much. Get out there, write your senators, and tell them that Doom VFR controls suck. And until next time, I will see you guys on the other side.